Genealogy. We shall talk about an ancient people here, as ancient as the eternal forest. It has ancestors of all ages and all nations, for it is not a tribe of the body, but of the soul, not of the inhabitants of a forest, but of its lovers, of the true worshippers of the wood. Of this family came the poet of Hellas, who sang the myths of Pan and his satyrs, and Baldur in Scandinavia, and that spiritual relative of theirs, who gave the Kupala night to the Slavs. Later, this family found a patron among the followers of the new religion, because he had their soul and their lineage, a lover and singer of the sun, a preacher to birds and fish, a friend of all God's little creatures, the seraphic Saint Francis. Thus, these folk can be seen to have sages and scholars and saints among their ancestors. And although they may at times seem to have been swallowed up by the general mass of humanity, yet they have retained a certain distinctive quality of their forest soul. Yes, they have been snowed under by earthly upheavals, by the feverish pursuits of ordinary life, by complications and conditions, and by the very struggle for material existence. All of these removed them from nature. 1, civilization. 2, the so-called progress. 3, the destruction of nature through the expansion of industry. 4, the terrible burden of modern existence. 5, modern rights and obligations. Seemingly, then, there is no place and no life for these forest folk. But it only seems so because they have adapted the best they could to their conditions and make an effort to appear no different from others. They fulfill their daily duties, they work hard with and among others. They participate in civilization, they take part in progress. They use its inventions, know how to handle money, live in cities, dress like others, go to the theater. Has the lineage and tradition of the forest people perished, then? Not in the world. Immortal is the spirit, and the lineage of the spirit is immortal. It's just that he who would know this tribe must stem from it. Then he will find his kind. One need not look for this tribe in quiet villages or deep forests, among the people engaged in the business of nature, aka forestry or agriculture, which would be to say, in their proper sphere. One can often search there long and in vain, but find it instead in a great factory town. One can find its member in a student's garret, where a boy, after finishing with his algebra, instead of going out to look for company in a stuffy bar, plays with and looks after his pet bullfinch, or in the basement shop of a shoemaker, who hardly knows the name of the bird that chirps for him while he's busy nailing leather. One can recognize its members in a crowd by their peculiar behavior in certain unusual circumstances of city life. And thus, when the papers come out in the evening with the latest dispatches of a war, a scandalous trial, a sensational murder, and a certain person does not pick up the newspaper, but instead studies with a smile how the sparrows settle for the night, she is of the forest folk. And from this family comes she who, amid a solemn street procession, when everyone else is absorbed in music, uniforms, caparisons, and parading ranks of soldiers in civic societies, notices a chilled pooch in front of a closed shop door and opens it for him with a gentle word of kindness. Among the classified advertisements, a member of this family will spot the address of a caged nightingale seller, ransom the prisoner, and release him from captivity with the arrival of spring, partaking in his joy of liberation. The forest folk usually keep shy from others, hide their souls, and do not talk about their inner life, aware that no one cares about it. In the monstrous mill of worldly life, where financial self-interest and the ruthless struggle for the luxuries of civilization reign, as they deal with others, with horror or utter astonishment in their eyes, they remain silent, They fulfill their social obligations and look out, only not to allow themselves to be crushed and pulverized. They do not fear for their souls. Those are safe from the world's pollution. And so, they vegetate, rare in the world and strangers to it. Occasionally they find a friend. Then the doors of the soul fling open, and the newfound friends find solace in each other. Dreams, needs, longings, all suddenly find their expression in words. As never before now, they suddenly give voice to their lust for freedom, for quiet, for communion with nature. They express their souls and strive to turn those longings into action, for life after their own hearts. And precisely that kind of life, a whole summer of it, will be our topic here. For those who had lived it, it will be a chronicle of happiness. For those who, in their worldly exile, only dream of it, a brotherly postcard, and perhaps a call to action. There were 3 of them. The oldest, their chief and commander, was cunning, stubborn in his resolve, quick to decide, knowledgeable about nature's science, and experienced in living with it. He owned a vast stretch of land, some 3,000 acres, and on it, agricultural land with a manor house, the nerve center of his agricultural enterprise. All around it lay various marshes and forests, cut by a network of slow meandering streams and rivulets, set well off from public roads and wholly unappetizing to human greed. There, in the depths of those unproductive marshlands, hidden like a secret lair, a forester's cabin came into existence one spring. For some time afterward, the shingle roof and sideboards shone white in the sun, and the deep ruts in the ground shone black, where the carts had brought the building materials. But within a year, all that newness was buried in the greenery of grass and moss. Wild rose and heather covered the walls, and the cabin melted into the surrounding landscape. The forest folk called it their refuge. Life had robbed the chief of relatives. He had no family. But his house was full of God's creatures, who remained in the manor house under the care and protection of his companion, a friend whom he had trained and shaped after his own image. In their joking jargon, they called the chief Wolverine and his friend Panther. Panther was the youngest, all made of steely muscle, swift, agile, and with his namesake's wildness and rapacity. He knew nature from living with it. He understood mountains, waters, meadows. He had a forest soul through and through. Later, a third one joined them, whom they called Crane. He had the purest soul of them all, the embodiment of kindness, gentleness, and inward sunny happiness. He rejoiced in the life of the forest as only youth can rejoice. He was a dreamer, a little absent-minded, quick to laugh, industrious, and of both iron health and constitution. The 3 complemented each other and became regular summertime residents in that refuge of theirs, the founders and builders of that life. There, they lived at one with the wilderness, like every other creature that arrived there in spring and flew away in autumn. Their refuge, locked up for the winter, fell asleep at the end of summer. First, the roof was buried under golden leaves, then under snow, and then only animals drew their tracks about it. Tits and squirrels wintered under its eaves. Hares came to feed in the feeders, and snakes buried themselves to hibernate under the foundations. Finches came to feed on the frozen berries, and from time to time, deer approached to nibble on the dried-up flowers planted there by Crane. Meanwhile, far away, among the maddening crowd, the forest folk remembered their cabin and dreamed of tits and finches and the rest of their summer friends, and awaited springtime.